of you who were here really set us up quite nicely for innovation and transformation because, to be honest, I'm in sort of more on the software side and hadn't really thought that deeply about sort of what is going on the hardware side. And we're clearly in for a time where established companies are going to have to transform themselves while continuing to innovate. And those of you in the startups or younger companies space are clearly going to have to innovate very rapidly to take into account what's going on with AI, for example, but a lot of other innovations as well. And so the challenge of how do you innovate and transform at the same time, which seems to be the path we're all going to be on for the next so many years, I think is something we can learn a lot about from this esteemed panel that we have assembled for you. So I'm not going to try and summarize their records because I just don't like reading bios, and I don't know what the highlights of their careers are. So I'm just going to go one by one and ask them to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about their career and the current employers or the companies that they lead are at, and what some of the highlights from their careers are, and then we will go ahead with the panel. So Cleve, since you're sitting right next to me, you get to go first.
Thanks. Cleve Adams. I'm a 6-time CEO in the tech industry. I'm the original co-founder of a company called WebSense, which was a company here in San Diego that we took from 2 guys and a dog and a plastic table to $1 billion IPO a few years later, and eventually sold the company to Raytheon for $2 billion. Today, I own a private equity firm that invests in and advises and is a business accelerator for tech startups.
Thank you, Cleve. Thomas?
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Thomas Riedel. I am the Chief Product Officer at Viasat. I actually recently joined the company. It was just a couple months ago. Before that, I was at Google in various roles. I was part of the founding team of Android TV. I was involved in product strategy in Europe, and most recently ran most part of the product management team for Chromebooks.
So we have a CEO and a Chief Product Officer. Aniqa?
I'm Aniqa Hijazi. I'm the CFO and COO for SalesLayer. We're in the PIM space. My expertise are basically coming after Series B and taking the company to some sort of an exit. Prior to that, I was with another startup that had a wonderful exit as well in the e-commerce space. So my background is finance, accounting, cross-functional, and operations, and basically been with Cisco for many years, led their US and Canada theater, done public accounting, technical accounting, finance operations, everything. So that's the perspective I'm bringing in.
And Mark?
Hi, I'm Mark Chapman. I've been in the building consumer technology companies for the last 25 years. First one that I did was a company called Snapfish, an online photo company, and we sold that to HP. And then worked for other ones such as Minted, a company called Symphony Commerce. And my most recent company was one in the food space that we actually sold to Nestle this past year.
So you can see sort of the accumulated experience we have on this stage, and let's jump right into it and think about what they can happen. But I have a comment on Cisco because how many of you remember when Cisco was actually this IPO stock and a growth stock? Some of us, right? We're showing our.
I can tell you I was not there then.
Just the OGs.
Yeah, just the OGs, exactly. And Viasat, by the way. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Viasat, but they supply sort of the internet connectivity that we are all addicted to when we get on planes, which I assume most of us travel a lot. So these, and I remember Snapfish actually very well because
we got 3 people from Snapfish here.
Yeah.
I saw Raj was there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it really speaks to sort of the experience they've got. But the other thing I want to comment on briefly before I turn it over, if you were here again for the last panel, you saw sort of this discussion, and it was focused largely on the technical architecture of what we need to do for artificial intelligence. But it makes the point very clearly, I think, which is you've got sort of the lowest layer of the stack, which is the semiconductor, then you've got memory, you've got interconnect, you've got whatever, and all the way up to sort of the application layers. But if you look at if you listen carefully to what they were all saying, it requires an immense amount of coordination to pull off amidst rapid change, sort of this coordinated approach, this integrated architected approach to innovation and to being a successful company at the end of the day. And oftentimes with my experience with these companies, you have very different points of view. The chief product officer is arguing for something, and there's Aniqa as the chief financial officer saying, absolutely no can do, we don't have money for that, or it's costing way too much.
I'm the most popular person in the company.
CFOs in the technology world always get the short end of the stick, right? It's like they're the ones who have to say yes, but oftentimes say no. So there is an essential tension between what each sort of constituency, and we're all trained to argue very vociferously for our own sort of constituency and our point of view. So I think what we have to find is the balance between all of these and what moves our company forward. So let's just start with the broad question. Why don't I start with you, Thomas? With your extensive leadership experience, what is the role of the C-suite in driving innovation transformation?
Yeah, so it's interesting. My journey now, as I've joined Viasat as the Chief Product Officer, it's an interesting one because they didn't have this role before. So I'm actually the first one. And so they've had the Chief Engineering Officer, they've had CTO, effectively, they had CFOs, Chief Marketing, all these roles. Product was new. And there's always this question like, do you need another chief? You know, why let's stay lean, right? What's going on? Why do we need this role at all? And what became clear is that especially with more, established companies like Viasat, they've been around for more or less 30 plus years. In this case, it was a very engineering-led, industrial company, and they had all the, functions you would expect. They had a very strong sales team. They had a very strong engineering team. But interestingly, the way they've been set up was by almost like by mini companies within the group. And they had their own, effectively P&L, everything was within one segment. Let's say there was a head of aviation who ran the entire group, engineering, product, and so forth. And then there was maritime and so forth. And this is where I really see the benefit of having somebody come in at the C-level and help make a change, where you are able to come in and say, my remit is across all these segments to help uncover these hidden gems, these new product ideas, these things that we can all actually do better for the benefit of the company, as opposed to for one part of that company, for that segment, if you will.
Talk a little more about sort of the articulation for the importance of the role of the Chief Product Officer versus what I think you described to me when we were prepping was sort of a program-based management approach.
Yeah, so oftentimes in engineering-led companies, I've seen this in my time at Google, I've seen it in many other companies that have been around for a long time. Product is something that people, can't really put their finger on. So what is this team supposed to be doing? Especially in earlier stage companies, startups, I always say the founder is actually oftentimes the OG Chief Product Officer. Yep. They have the vision. That's the reason oftentimes the company exists in the first place. They have oftentimes very strong opinions about what the company should be working on. And they see their vision manifested in the product offering. But over time, as these companies grow, in this case, I think for Viasat, they had extremely powerful ideas, and the technology was there, the engineers are exceptional. And so oftentimes, though, as we start in certain sectors, such as government, the way you build roadmaps is with the government, is in like, they tell you what to do, they spec it out. So it's almost like project-driven, spec-driven. So oftentimes early on in these sectors, you don't necessarily have a product view like you might find in other tech companies further up the stack. Where I come in now and where we can really help as we establishing a central product team is to move away from being customer-driven or spec-driven to actually genuinely solving problems the market needs and then build products at scale. And this is very hard to do if you run from project to project. Yes. Or it's very hard if you just build for one customer at a time. But you need to give that product group the room to breathe and establish itself.
Mark, what about you from the COO perspective?
Yeah, I think that from a COO perspective, you're constantly looking at how you can become more efficient in your company. And in today's environment, with technology changing so rapidly, even more now with AI, it's really critical that you're looking sort of beyond, the next 2, 5, 10 years, and then figuring out what processes, what systems, what organizational structure internally that you need to do in order to get the company to operate efficiently. And and then assembling the team, getting them rallied around that vision and organizing them in a way that they can operate, with autonomy, as you were saying, Tom.
That's great. And Aniqa?
So the role of a CFO and a CEO kind of align well because you need both of those to really get the strategic prioritization done. And from a CFO perspective, I can tell you, it's a balancing act throughout. You want to be competitive in the market, but there's a cost to transformation. The larger the company, the greater the cost of transformation. So I've done that at Cisco, where it can take you years and can cost you a lot of money. Or even at a startup level or scale-up level where you know it's needed, but it's a balancing act because you want to have the competitive edge. You want to make sure which kind of transformation is giving you the most value, and doing a very thought cost-benefit analysis is going to make you be able to make that decision that is going to benefit you. And that is where a CFO comes in and plays that important role, because there'll be many things that you'll have to say no to.
Yep.
But the one thing that you do say yes to better be the right thing. And that's the job of them identifying what that is cross-functionally.
So I'm going to come back to you right after I get done with Cleve. So I'm going to give you a heads up on the question I'm going to ask you. This is the way I run my classes too, by the way. There's so much uncertainty in the world. If you just hear this panel we had before us with 4 sort of technology experts around AI, and there was, I wouldn't call it disagreement, but multiple points of view about where this industry might be going. And so part of the challenge you have as a CFO is how do you place a bet when it's a much harder, there's much more uncertainty. I don't know if it's a harder bet to place, but it's very hard to choose between these. So I'll come back to you, but I want to get the CEO perspective on sort of, you've heard the 3 folks before you, and there's different, and obviously each of them has a constituency. It's your job, to sort of coordinate all of these things and move the company forward as a whole. How have you operated in the past, and what would you suggest for the future in terms of sort of developing a cohesive, integrated approach to innovation and transformation?
Great question. Well, we all know that a CEO in a startup environment just depends on the environment.
Sure, of course.
Is the CEO, is the CFO, and is the CTO and the COO. So
We don't need you guys anymore.
Chief only officer.
and the CPO, and only you add these individuals as the company grows, as you need them, right? So in the beginning, the CEO is the guy. And he's making the decisions on the products, and he's making the decisions if I can afford it, and he's making the decisions if I hire people to do it. So it's all about the level of the company. But I'm one of the CEOs that say, you got to innovate or die. You have to innovate. I mean, we were using artificial intelligence at WebSense in 1998. All right, so that gives you an idea how long AI has been around. Of course, we didn't call it AI then, we call it machine learning. We wrote machine learning algorithms to go do the things we wanted it to do, but as it learned and got smarter and got better, it was just as good as any AI is today. But now they've obviously commercialized it to the point where anybody can use it. So that's the difference. Bill, I'm a big guy on innovation. You really have to go out there and keep innovating, keep changing, keep pushing the edge in order to stay effective. And that's the way you get funded. That's the way you survive. That's the way people, if you go public, invest in your company, because they see that you're going to continue to innovate and you're going to continue to change. And the biggest thing is that you're different. You have to be different. You have to have a main differentiator in order to stay alive. So that's the kind of thing that you must do. So innovation is key, whether it be artificial intelligence or another type of innovation. You always have to do it, and you always have to keep ahead.
But in your experiences, you've got multiple points of view expressed by sort of different stakeholders. Now, let's assume you're bigger now. You're not all of the CEO roles, CXO roles rolled into one. What are some of the things that you've had to do to sort of move the company forward in a more cohesive way? Because you are always going to get smart people with different opinions. And I think that's one of these, I mean, you just see 2 people, leaving OpenAI because they thought they weren't doing enough on safety or whatever the case might be. So there has to be some resolution that, and I guess the CEO also has to be very resolute in leading. So thoughts and advice for the folks in this audience about how you've led in the past.
Well, I've led in the past because I'm completely open communicator. So I have open communications with every one of my staff every day. And I definitely have a staff meeting once a week. So we all have to get together and air each other's differences and find out where one department can help another department. So I think it's just open communications. Okay. I mean, the guys at OpenAI wouldn't have left if Sam would have had open communications with them and say, hey, what's your problem? What's going on? Why aren't you innovating? How can I help? Those types of things. And so they decide, they get frustrated and leave. But if they had open communications and they met weekly or even more than that, then I don't think it would have been an issue.
You should have probably met more often with Scarlett Johansson too, don't you think?
As often as possible.
That's an interesting story. The saga continues from what I read. I want to shift the conversation, and I'm going to come to you, Aniqa, next, like I said, but I wanted to sort of, you can't not talk about AI today. You know, I run my own conference, and nobody wants to talk about anything other than AI. So in the context of AI, where there's so much uncertainty, because, you know, we're talking about large language models, and we just heard about sort of all these different classes of models that are going to be built, you know, some that are going to be small enough to fit on an enhanced smartphone, for lack of a better phrase. But you're going to see lots and lots of choices. And earlier I was talking to somebody who's building a platform of platforms, and the idea is sort of this is you approach that platform and it will choose the best model for you and so on. But regardless of all of the specifics, there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty. We've all heard this expression, you know, the world is moving extremely fast today and is the slowest I'm ever going to see. I don't think it's ever been more true than in sort of just with how much money is going to AI. So the uncertainty that we're seeing now is unprecedented, at least I think. And actually, I just realized I took a class in Introduction to AI as an undergraduate. So even
It's been around.
It's been around. I don't even, and my master's thesis was on the computer recognition of electrocardiograms. And so people have been doing this for a long time, but it was really expert systems back in the day. How do you deal with uncertainty in your job, Aniqa? How do you place the right bets? How do you know what to say yes to?
As a CFO, what we deal with is mostly uncertainty. We work with models, we work with forecasts, we work with projections, so there's uncertainty to begin with. But I think when you bring in AI into the mix, there's not just numbers you're talking about, the business impact.
Yep.
And the business impact is what is really going to drive the future competitiveness of that company or not. Yes. And understanding that, because you can be a numbers person and just look at, this is my P&L, I need to meet it, this is my budget. But really understanding where you will be 3 years from now on. Forget about for a startup or scale up, 5 years is still too long.
Yes.
So 3 years, where you will be and how do you get there, making sure that everybody cross-functionally is aligned. And that alignment is very important, not just at the cross-functional level, but also at the board level. You're aligned, you know exactly what the priorities are, and then you, through that transparency and those communication, make sure that everybody in the company is marching to the same beat, because then it makes it easier. It's easier to do human AI collaboration. It's easier to look for that kind of talents. It's easier to say, this is what we're funding and this is not what we're funding or we're holding off. Those conversations are easier to do when you have that vision and you can articulate that vision knowing that you and your heart feel that that's the right bet to make, which is a hard one, but that's how you have to go about it.
But I think that you sort of added to Cleve's point, which is, it's, you know, after you get past the open communication, I think what you have to have a shared vision, particularly in the startup world, right?
Oh,
because there's only so much money to go around.
And only so many people.
And only so many people. And so you're all, and you know, we often talk about this in business school, which is the difference between some startups and sort of established companies. And startups tend to be mission-driven or purpose-driven. And I think you're stressing the importance of that. Mark, you've got a lot of experience.
Add to that is that I think you really need to think about where your company is at in its life cycle, and then figure out which technologies, whether it's AI or any other technology, is going to help you achieve what you need to accomplish in the next 6 to 12 months or whatever the case might be. And I think that helps then drive your strategic roadmap and figure out, okay, what, you know, are we at the point in the company where we need to scale? Are we at the point in the company where we need to go raise funding? Are we at the point in the company where we need to accelerate our acquisition? And so I think there's tools out there and technologies that can help in either of those things, and then figuring out which one of those is going to have the greatest impact in the shortest amount of time is critical.
Yeah, one of the things I struggle with a lot is because it's one thing about how you will use AI at your company and, you know, whether you have a play. I think the other piece of it is AI is wiping out companies and industries as well, right? So, or let me make it more focused, like job categories. Like, you know, for a long time people were saying, hey, don't ever have your child become a radiologist because those jobs are going to be gone. But the reality is, Jeff Hinton actually said that, and radiologists are very much thriving. Yeah. And so it's very hard to place those bets, but I think sort of there's the what we do internally with AI, and then sort of what AI does to us through some other startup, or maybe these services are not needed. Like when you start thinking about India, where I'm originally from, the two biggest services sectors are software and call centers. And India as a whole is extremely worried about what is going to happen to those two industries, because clearly there's going to be a lot of, but Thomas, what are your takes on AI and how, I know you're pretty good with AI, obviously at Google, but now at Viasat as well?
Yeah, it's interesting. Over the last couple of years, I've seen, the Google really where it was until basically Q1 this year, just transformed quite dramatically. But if there's one thing I learned is that just because as a company you declare that publicly, doesn't mean that most of your employees know what to do. Even internally at Google, we would have AI hackathons, and the first couple of days, we actually just establish what are the models, how do you actually, how do you start checking in code, how does it actually work to build that? So, most importantly, you have to make sure that everybody's curious and they get the opportunity to learn and you give them the tools to try them out. As you said, it's very early days. At Viasat, what I'm really excited about is you have these assets, right? Constellations of satellites in the sky, ground networks, connecting all around the world. And the question is where do you deploy AI? And the answer is, almost in all teams, really, in different ways. Give you an example, right?
Did you say small teams?
Across most teams, actually. Most teams. So give you an example, right? We talked about call centers. We have a direct-to-consumer business, and you can serve your customer base so much more efficiently if you deploy AI with your chatbots in a way you service the companies that then deploy your services, you work with your resellers, you make them more efficient. But there's so many other examples. For example, when you actually have a satellite constellation and you have to allocate bandwidth most efficiently, because it's just not distributed uniformly in terms of demand, AI can actually help you do that.
Yeah.
It can help you position the satellites in the right way, steer the beams, and so ultimately as a company become more efficient very quickly.
I've heard a very similar story from one of the big telecom providers, because one thing I never thought about was what they do with their capacity at night, for example, and the energy savings from turning off cell towers in a smart way is very significant. And AI, they're using AI a lot. Who thinks about, we just pick up our cell phones and don't even think about what's actually happening behind the scenes, and I think that's really powerful. Cleve, you said you used AI at WebSense, and actually, that also reveals my age. I was
100 years ago.
I know, okay, no. You may be 105, but I'm not. But I remember WebSense very well because it was a San Diego-based company.
San Diego-based.
And I remember that it was one of the first cybersecurity companies, which is, of course, tell us a little bit about
Actually, we were the first cybersecurity unicorn, the very first one. And more importantly, the first SaaS company. There's no other company out there in 1996 when we started WebSense that was as a software as a service.
But tell us a little bit about the WebSense story and sort of how you used AI back then, because now all the cybersecurity companies are talking about their AI-first solutions. So what were you doing back in the day at WebSense?
Well, WebSense started, as you know, we tried to catalog the internet. The reason we tried to catalog the internet is because we partnered with companies like Checkpoint, which was one of the first cybersecurity companies that was just brought over from Israel. We partnered with Cisco, which just bought a firewall called the Pix firewall. This is so early on cybersecurity, before they put the cyber in front of it. And then the other company in there was Microsoft and John McAfee, right? Those were really the players in the cybersecurity space when we started. So our goal was to catalog the content on the web. Nobody had done that. And to do that, we had to go through and catalog every website. Can you imagine? So WebSense, obviously, when it first started, since 99% of the internet was porn, at that time, WebSense started out being a porn filter, right? Yes, we had gambling sites, and we had Bank of America sites, and we had shopping for Chevy sites, but 90% of it was porn. So that attracted a lot of people that wanted to work for us. So we had analysts that would come in from San Diego State, University of San Diego, UCSD, and work all night long surfing porn. And that enabled them to catalog the porn sites, would enable us to, and pay them per the site that they catalog.
I've never heard of anybody cataloging porn sites.
Cataloging porn sites. It started. Now it became much bigger and much greater because we secured everything, all content, including emails and incoming and outgoing communications and so on. But that's how it started. But to do that, we had to write machine learning algorithms as bots to crawl the web and find these crazy sites that are out there. And depending on the color they were, and depending on the shapes that they were, and depending on the keywords that were in it, and the content that was on the page, that allowed us to write algorithms for machine learning algorithms that enabled us to go crawl the web and find these sites and bring them into the sites so a human could actually then take a look at the sites and say, yeah, that's worthy to catalog and that's not. So those are the types of things we did very early on using machine learning and AI to help us.
Great, thank you. Let's go more squarely into AI. So, Mark, you said you were you were increasingly trying to use, you were considering some opportunities where they were becoming more AI-centric.
Yeah, but it was more so along the lines of taking over different processes, right? That we could do more efficiently, right? And we dabbled a little bit with it initially with a chatbot, and then now we're considering it like, can we use it to actually help us code? And so there's definitely opportunities with it, but from our perspective, we're looking at it more from the standpoint of how does it actually make us more efficient. And it comes with a double-edged sword, right? So you have, obviously, as a C-level executive, you have a fiduciary responsibility to your shareholders to make the company as profitable as you can and as successful as you can. But then the flip side of that is that you're actually implementing some technologies that could make some of your employees feel like they're going to lose their job. And so you're now in this position where you have to either retrain employees or get them bought in terms of what you're doing and whatnot. So it's a balancing act, and we're kind of like right in the middle of it right now.
I'm teaching a PhD seminar as we speak on the sort of the impact of generative AI on productivity. And to the extent that generative AI was just launched to the public in late 2022, I am just blown away by sort of how much academic research and actually industry research, because that shift is very visible these days, where a lot of the great research is coming out of industry. It is incredible in how many fields there is now documented evidence of productivity gains.
See, that's the point. So innovation has always led to more jobs from the very beginning. The more you innovate, the more you needed more people, whether they be finance people or technical people or engineers or so on. I think AI is going to have that same effect. AI is going to make your company more efficient. Therefore, you're going to need more employees. And if the employees change a little bit, maybe you're going to need more engineers because you want to keep developing the product. You're going to need more salespeople because your sales are going to increase. You're going to need more marketing people because you need to generate more leads for all the new salespeople you just hired. So I think the innovation in artificial intelligence, even though you said that there are a couple industries in India that were worried, the software industry doesn't have to worry about AI.
No,
they're going to continue to develop it.
And the demand for software will just, because the way I think
it's going to go up.
Yeah, because there is not a single product which is fully software full, right? I mean, there's always things we can do with software. So I agree with you about.
And the other one about the call centers.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you have the most efficient call center in the world, you're going to employ more people. And if you have more efficient, if you use innovation and AI and other technology to be more efficient and more effective and more productive, you're going to need more people.
But there's one thing that gets lost, in my opinion, in this debate as well, which is there's plenty of sectors where we don't have enough people right now. So, the Surgeon General of California was a past student of mine. I was talking to her. She says, Vijay, you've got this all wrong. And I said, what do you mean? And then she says, we just don't have enough physicians. We need AI to just satisfy our population right now. And for all of you who've tried to book an appointment with a doctor, and if you're above a certain age, you used to remember you can remember how easy you could get an appointment with your PCP in a week or two. Now, good luck if you can get an appointment in 3 years. I always tell my PCP, I'll either be dead or alive, but I won't need you by the time you're willing to see me, right? And I think that's something that we need to keep in mind too, which is our population is aging. We have sort of reduce the immigration levels, which is the other source of young people, and that's going to be an issue for us. You look like you're grabbing your mic, so go ahead, Thomas.
It actually just reminded me of a query I did yesterday. I saw somebody on X trying it out with Google, and they said, how many rocks should they eat per day? And the AI answered at least one. And as a source, it was UC Berkeley Department of Geologists. And so I think it just gives you a sense, absolutely, I agree with you. I think AI can have a huge impact, and it will make things more efficient. We'll need more jobs, higher value jobs. I think people are able to focus on much more, difficult tasks, if you will, right? And so the more automated things go away. But it's definitely tricky, especially in healthcare sector. The thing I see right now that has one of the biggest areas of opportunity, I think, as we mentioned, was engineering productivity. The way you use Copilot, the way you use these other tools to help you just generate really good software code. That for me is one of the biggest opportunities. Because again, it doesn't replace the engineer, it just makes sure that a lot of the things you have to do to set up your libraries, to make sure you put the unit tests in place, that actually is automated. And these are not the things people come to work every day anyway for.
Yep.
They want to work on the difficult problems.
In fact, that was one of the papers we studied on Wednesday, which GitHub Copilot, I mean, the documented impacts are unbelievable. And there's still so much more work to be done to figure out how to best use it. Part of the productivity is lost because people are still trying to figure out how to best use it. And I think once we get to best practice with that, I think there will be a lot more improvement. I've been given a 5-minute warning, so let's just start with you, Mark, and talk about final words of, let's focus on innovation and transformation. And I know you have a lot of experience with scaling, but words of wisdom for the audience and how they should think about sort of this specific moment in time in terms of growing and scaling businesses.
Yeah, I think the first is enjoy the ride because, I mean, this whole AI revolution is coming whether or not you want it to or not. And so, figuring out how it can work for you and building your company is going to be critical. And the second thing is, in terms of scaling these businesses and using these technologies to help you do that, the whole world of scale at all costs has kind of gone away over the last couple of years. And so, these investors, whether private equity or venture, they want you to scale profitably. So when you think about these technologies and how they can help you, think about how you can actually implement them and how it can actually help scale, like handle 10x the amount of volume that you're handling today, and at the same time do it cheaper so you can actually become more profitable. And that would be my advice.
Aniqa?
I will second that because 2 years ago, it was grow at any cost.
Yes.
Right now, those conversations in the boardrooms
Well, the interest rate environment just
completely
isn't
gone the
that.
other direction where they're like grow but efficiently. And there's, efficiently in caps. And I think that's important. I think we're just scratching the surface with AI. There's a lot to be learned. I think we're just figuring out how to do things better right now in a lot of places. So engineering being one, I mean, we're looking at how do we prospect better from a sales perspective, inbound motion, outbound, how do we do it better, customer success perspective, satisfaction scores going up. So there's a lot that I think we are learning, not so that we can just replace our labor force, but more so how do we become more efficient and do it better? Because if we learn to do it now, will we be able to scale better and grow more efficiently? So I think it goes back to that, and obviously making the right bets from a CFO perspective, where to invest, how much, and what do we get as an ROI is going to be key.
Thomas?
Yeah, I think for us, one of the biggest topics right now is we are in an insanely high capex heavy industry, right? Launching satellites the size of double-decker buses does cost a bit of money. And so for us, as we're looking to invest in new orbits and in new constellations, one of the biggest things for us is to really invest the time to understand what to focus on and then all the other 1,000 ideas to say no to.
Yep.
Product management can really help here to really identify the big opportunities in the market and literally look through all these many great opportunities and then hone in on the things that we really want to invest the money in. And then I think AI can play a role from idea generation to prototyping, all the way to then being able to deploy more efficiently and making sure you actually run scenarios, right? You actually can forecast capacity constraints and where we think the market is moving.
Cleve?
Well, I got a lot to say on that, but I'm going to say a little. So we all know the world is really changing right now in every way. And so operational efficiency, which was said earlier, is really the way to go with your company. If you are operationally efficient, then you are going to be profitable eventually. And if you're profitable, then your owners, your private equity firms and the venture capital firms and the people that give you money are happier. So I kind of liken it to a sports car, for instance. When I get into a company, I'm a contract CEO and I've gone into many different companies and try to find out, why they're being held back. And so when I go in, I take a look at all the different departments in operations, finance, technology, engineering, products, everything you can think of. And I put it together like a sports car. I have 8 cylinders in my sports car, and if one of my cylinders isn't firing well, I'm probably not going to win the race. And so what happens is I'll make sure all those cylinders are firing in my engine, so I have the opportunity to win the race. You really have one shot at this, what they really don't say enough. And if you don't innovate, and if you don't operate efficiently, and if you don't manage your capital, and if you don't manage your people, then you're going to have problems. So it's all about operational efficiency. It's all about making that sports car run perfectly. It's going to give you the chance to win.
And to which I will only add, I think these are fantastic insights. You really have to think about the path to sort of scale and value, and particularly value along the way, because as Aniqa said and others said as well, the days of sort of financing, I think about, can you make the Google kind of bet on a self-driving car and spend $10 billion plus on this car that hasn't made a dime yet, or maybe it's made a couple of dimes? And not very many companies can afford that. So you really have to find sort of the staged approach where because there is so much uncertainty, what we know for sure is you have to be able to make smart decisions at every phase. So you can't do the big bang implementations like we used to do, and you really need to think about sort of a structured approach to this, a decision tree approach, if you will. With that, let's thank the panel for an illuminating set of comments, and thank you all for your attention.